Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just remove the previous presenter's speech. Sorry. Good afternoon. Please bear with us. It's the afternoon of some of our third days, some of you the second days, but please, the enthusiasm continues. I think it's been a very good reef for everybody, actually, both investor, developer, and public sectors as well. My name's Simon Green. I'm Chief Executive of Humber Freeport. You probably see me around this week, and I know most of you from Business Connections. Before I introduce the esteemed, highly acclaimed panel, I just want to give a quick overview of the Freeport. We are a development catalyst. We're one catalyst amongst many. We're not the only one. We are a few. The Mayor Combined Authorities have arrived. They're doing with their investment plans. They've launched them. We're one of many catalysts. That's the first thing. But we are the first pan-Humber by statute organisation delivering this type of agenda for some time. We're also a government initiative, so we're backed by essentially MHCLG, DBT, OFI, DZSZ, DISN, you name them. There's about 8 I have to report on a weekly basis. And we're now part of, and I'm sure Paul will touch upon, something called industrial strategy zones and how that's developed over the next year or two. But our core offer is essentially how do we fill 600 hectares of sky? Because the topography of the Humber is such, if you look at any of our sites, there is a skyline rather than a topography of mountains. But how we're filling those 600 hectares is already, only 2.5 years in, on our 3 key sites, we've had over £2 billion worth of investment earmarked and over 1,500 jobs. Some of those are already on site, such as Mitsubishi and Siemens and Bunge, I think that's how you pronounce it, on the South Bank at Birmingham Port, and others are in the pipeline. We have a very strong pipeline. The 2 Gould sites, who are slightly behind the others for other completely honourable pre-port reasons, have now got full planning permission, and the pipeline there, which I'm sure Tom will elaborate clearly on one of those sites, if not both, is very, very strong. The challenge today with this is actually a challenge fed back from my panellists when we had a pre-conversation last week, was not just to do a sales pitch, but to actually do a challenge, question and answer to each other, and then open it to yourselves as the audience later on this afternoon. So that's the challenge. It's not a sales pitch you'll get here. You'll get hopefully some good, honest debate, and that is what I'm wanting from my 3 esteemed panellists. Thank you very much, and we'll start over now. So first and foremost, may I introduce, or get themselves to introduce themselves in terms of the panel, please. Jo, do you want to go first?
Jo Barnes, Managing Director of the Saul Group. We're a Hull headquartered business, but we work across the North and Midlands, and we're a collective of built environment businesses from construction to facilities management, investment and consultancy. Now, I am also, for my sins, a director of Humber Freeport, because we have a site in the Humber Freeport called the Yorkshire Energy Park. And it's, do you want me to say what it is now? Or yeah? It's a 212-acre site east of the city of Hull, near the ports. And it's a mixed-use development with space for energy generation and storage, for data centres, advanced manufacturing, university-led R&D, and also community facilities too on that site. So it's a big, complex site, and that's us.
And Tom?
I think I must have misheard when we spoke about this before, because I thought I've gone pure sales. That's all. That's all I'm here to do. Like I say, that's really ruined my script.
Cut your mic off.
I know, yeah, not for the first time. So I'm Tom Weldon. I'm a exec director at Henry Boot Developments. Also a director of the Freeport. The site which we're specifically focused on bringing forward is Freeport 36, so on junction 36 of the M62. And the reason I think it's an interesting site to talk about is scale. You know, we have an outline consent for 5.5 million square foot. We have flexibility in our master plan to deliver freehold and leasehold design and builds, and the businesses we're talking to at the moment are international, global organisations that want to locate in the Humber, and actually, I think similar to Jo and to the other Freeport parties, I think it's a really interesting, exciting time for the region, because actually, if we can't locate on a site, we can find somewhere else where they can. And I think it's how do we come together and try and make the most of this opportunity, which really does feel like a once in a lifetime scale of opportunity with government and everyone else. So I'm really keen just to kind of kick it around about how people in the room can help us and how we can all essentially make the most of the opportunity being presented.
Thank you. And Paul?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Addison. I'm the Director for the North of England in the Department for Business and Trade. My job is to work with businesses, our partners, whether it's folks in the Office for Investment or whether it's our financial institutions like the National Wealth Fund or Great British Energy, and try to work together in collaboration to move us, I'd say, beyond some of the fantastic strategic thinking that's been done in relation to this part of the world and into that kind of delivery and execution phase, which is where we all need to start agitating towards. Historically, prior to starting this role, worked for Great British Energy as the Director of Policy. And prior to that, I was with Arup for many years and Siemens too. And I can attest that the first series of phone calls when I received my kind of entrance into the job for the first day was from folks in this patch. It was from the Freeport. It was from colleagues, across the broader region. And so I'm really, really passionate to get the conversation going and try and see what we can do to translate some of this stuff that we will hear in the language of East Coast Cluster and all this industrial strategy, and start to translate that into things that can be delivered into really, really crunchy projects. That's what I want to do in this particular role. So it's really good to be on this panel this afternoon.
Thank you, and nothing but keen.
Oh, why? Yeah.
First question. The Humber for so long has been the gateway to everywhere, the access to everywhere. It's perhaps, though, historically underperformed in terms of its economy. Not dwelling on that, but why do you think things are changing now and the investment is starting to flow? What key factors have made a difference over the last 2-3 years? And I'll start with Joe. Joe and myself go back in terms of years, know the area, and then obviously on to Tom and Paul.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it isn't. We've got a really good window of opportunity at the moment because there's been a realisation, not just amongst the people in the Humber, but also wider government and internationally, that we've got something a bit strange actually in the Humber. We generate a lot of power. There is a lot of innovation on power generation going on at the moment, and a lot of that is within the Humber. And that's certainly, we're getting lots of inquiries from those sorts of companies and their supply chain. And I would also say, of course, the power is great and everyone needs power and there's not enough grid. We know this. We do have power on our site, just saying, but some people don't. But it's not really just the power that's the thing. It's the extent and resilience of power that we could have in the Humber that could be the bedrock for lots of new industries, some of which we don't even know exist yet. That will be innovations that will come in the next generation and the generation beyond. And it's great. I mean, I've been in the Humber area for 25-6 years now, and it feels like the first time that we're actually confidently recognising that we have all of this stuff that we've not really utilised, and the pressure is on energy markets now in a way that it wasn't before, and we have to do something different. But that will give us an unrivalled economic opportunity, in my view. So that's the main thing. I'm also quite hopeful that I've spent a lot of years, and actually I've been with the Soul Group 18 years now, but before I was with the Soul Group, I was in the public sector. I worked in the public sector around the country, but latterly in Hull. And it does feel a bit different at the minute. It does feel like people are trying to at least work together in a very much more coordinated way. And, I've just been, this afternoon, I've been to several other events, including some people that we would possibly have traditionally have seen as our rivals. And actually, the UK is not that big. We've got a global opportunity here. We do need to work more closely together with some of them. So I think just that grown-up conversation about what we could do more of and better if we work together and a bit more collaboratively, both within the region and outside of the region. And that's the conversation that we seem to be having now, which is great.
Thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, I also have been round to a few different panels and areas, and you try and pick out what's the big difference between a region and what's the kind of USP. And I keep hearing open for business, open for business. And you kind of actually, what do people mean by open for business, and kind of where kind of isn't open for business? So I think we have to be really clear in the Humber as to what we actually mean. And it's not for words we're open for business. We need to show it in our actions as to actually how we work as a pack, how we hunt opportunities and how we convert them. But I think what you're starting to see with the Humber Freeport is the benefit of devolution and the benefit of not having a single kind of homogenized kind of spatial property strategy. So instead of saying, look, this worked really well in South Wales, let's do that again in Yorkshire. And actually, it doesn't play to the strengths of the region. It doesn't play to the strengths of the existing businesses. It doesn't play to the inherent characteristics of the district. And actually, you look at the Humber and the benefits it can bring from accessing global trade. You look at the legacy of coal mining and power generation within the region, and then how that can link into the decarbonisation of UK PLC. And then you can clearly articulate and join those dots. And for me, the Freeport, us working collaboratively, us working with local authorities, I do think there is a genuine urgency to make something happen. And I think we're all, maybe it's me, just sick of how long stuff takes and how difficult development is. And I know, it's just, it's hard work. But so actually, what can we do to make it easier? What can we do to have a faster conversation? And actually, I do think now, via Simon, via local authorities, dedicated case officers, I can genuinely say we can get planning within a sensible time frame. I think we can escalate if we need to. We can phone the mayor. We have politicians who are interested in the scheme. Like, I've been called down to Westminster to talk about it, and that's because they see the significance and scale. And I've struggled on other schemes to have that opportunity. So I think it's genuinely super exciting. And then I think the pressure is on everyone to really optimise it and make the most of the region.
Thank you. Before I bring Paul in, just to reinforce that point, I think one of the key attributes when we deal with inquiries is actually having a balanced portfolio of sites. So we have the three main sites of Hull, East, Goole and Immingham. They all offer something different and they all complement. And that's one of the key aspects of being, I suppose, live and current for all inquiries without having that homogenised, standard, fair and offer and that awful strapline open for business. Well, who's going to say that they're not? I mean,
can I just add to that, Simon's? Just this thing about, because obviously we've got the promoters of the sites in the Freeport, and we're all private businesses. We're all there to try and make a turn on these developments, but we're not really in competition with each other because they're all very different sites. And actually, when we get inquiries, and Dan's here from my team, and he's had quite a few, they haven't been relevant for us, or we can't meet exactly what they want. He gets on the phone to colleagues to talk about whether it would suit their site better. And we've had quite a few of those now. And that sort of mutuality of trying to just make the whole lot move along a lot quicker is brilliant.
Thank you.
And I've not seen that before.
No, it's a step change. Paul, relatively new to the area. Clearly you cover the north, but the most important bit is ours. To put you on the spot there, and to say, in terms of this step change that we all palpable energy that's now coming through from the Humber, what do you think is different from here from, say, other areas, or are we on catch up? And be honest.
Well, I will be honest. I find it fascinating. The panel have touched on this a little bit. I think there are a couple of things that are happening. Actually, there are three things specifically. I think one is the broader geopolitical landscape is having an impact on the UK. And I know this is zoning in quite specifically on energy and energy security and the domestic policy desire to get more homegrown industrial production in the UK in key sites. I think that is coinciding with a clear desire from government and from other partners to make industrial strategy something that can take off across the north. And there's a whole broader northern growth strategy that's being led by Tom Riordan in the Treasury, which we collaborate with on. And I think there is this kind of broader sense that there is a window of opportunity. And for this particular patch and Humber, I think the market momentum has been building for quite some time. It's been building, I was going to say when, originally Siemens started its investments in Alexander Dock, but actually it's been building for quite some considerable time. And I think what I've noticed that's different in the last, say, year specifically is that there seems to be one more single coordinated voice, and it seems to be more consistent in terms of the technologies, the place-based opportunities, and that gets greater cut through. If you're sat, I'm not, because I work in the north of England, I'm based in Leeds, but if you're sat in Whitehall and you're thinking with that devolution hat on and how you're going to get more power and financial devolution into certain areas, you're going to you've got so much information to wade through. What this particular patch has been good at has been fairly consistent and clear in the message and the asks, and that starts to resonate. So I think what's happened is, I suppose it's reputational in some senses, but also it's linked to that broader policy environment, and it's one of those things that kind of catches its own momentum.
Thank you, and that's really pleasing to hear that, unprescribed as well, because one of the key things we've set out to do was build on where we have competitive advantage within the Humber to enable us to compete, because people wanted to be in the Humber, a demand pull to be there, whatever that key sector or segment was. I think gone are the days of we'll go out there and trying to attract everything for everything's sake, just because it's there. Far from it. If we're far more targeted and specific in what we're doing, with a complementary balanced portfolio of properties and sites and assistance, that's beginning, I think, to really pay off, and that's really pleasing to hear that from yourself, Paul, coming relatively new now into that role and where we are within the Humber. Building on that, we're patting ourselves on the back, step change, things are getting better, but, however, somebody said don't say but I'll say however instead. What factors need to accelerate this investment? What's needed to change to keep this momentum going, if not accelerate it? Can I start with Tom, please, in the middle?
I'm going to touch on one major thing which I think will make the biggest difference, and that's power. So we have power, but it takes a long time to cost it and to get it to site kind of ready to go. And we still have, we're making some progress. I see it. John from Stubbs and Whitelands back there, and we're working collaboratively to try and bring bits forward. But I think if government can help accelerate power and help investment in infrastructure to then facilitate deals, I think that would go the furthest to helping maximise the opportunity. I think we also have a problem in the UK with the cost of power compared to other global locations, and there are steps towards SMR and bringing in new investment, but an observation is it's so slow to bring that forward. And I think there has to be questions on how can we work to lower costs. So whether that's a mix of uses, greater use of PV, greater use of wind, but we do need that to become more competitive globally.
So just to put you on the spot a little, what would accelerate bringing forward that power?
Money.
Right. Okay. Paul, have we got any money from the government?
Yeah, come on, that's
Show me the money.
Look, the amount of you've kind of got this well published in the literature that you've provided here and elsewhere, but it's really encouraging when you see that the private capital that's mobilised is in the order of 15 billion, right? And there is that kind of momentum that's coming with that. I know I'm coming at this through a specific energy lens, and that's partly because of the background in government that I've worked in as of most recent, and I appreciate the kind of diversity of and complexity in the Freeport, for example. But I do think there is a significant opportunity to find ways of concentrating even further government engagement in the patch. And you asked me in a previous question about other areas in the UK. I mean, I've done a hell of a lot of work as of recent in Aberdeen, and there is a very clear and consistent R&D and supply chain infrastructure, resourcing, almost like ecosystem for the energy sector, which is comprises of the ETZ, it comprises of folks from Great British Energy, the North Sea Transition Authority, etc., etc. I think that there is probably a strategic case to be built over time to see what more of similar types of institutions can coalesce in this patch. I don't know how that's going to shape up quite yet, but when it comes to things like energy and the East Coast, we're going to have to bring even greater proximity from some of the bodies that are adjacent to government, your NESOs, your GBEs, your others, and I think that's going to be a really important part to the jigsaw puzzle as we move forward. You can have devolution, and you should, and absolutely, as a patch, continue and accelerate down that journey. But I want to see what more systems that Whitehall can bring to bear, get even closer to the region. I don't know why that's going to, shape over time, but I think it's a conversation worth exploring as you kind of start to, as a community, as a business community, start to push for greater delivery.
Thank you. Joe, land values, lower labour costs are all an addition, they're an attraction as long as you have the skills, but they create problems of viability gap. What's your experiences with viability gaps, and what's your suggestions in trying to address those in the Humber?
Yeah, I mean the land value is low in lots of our former industrial parts of the country, isn't it? And that doesn't necessarily help when you're looking to invest and raise finance against future values. I would say as well, and I feel like a stuck record with this, but I will say it. So power is the most important thing. But some of the planning conditions, because we're not looking at these schemes universally, strategically, in my view, we have inherited a number of planning conditions, particularly around the biodiversity side of things, which we need a universal solution to. I mean, the Humber is a beautiful part of the world and has, special scientific interest and some really special bits of biodiversity that need looking after. But if we're all having to do 100% of that in all of our applications, then the net gain is hundreds of percent, not replacing or supporting what's there. It's asking us to do something that's over and above, if you ask me. Personal view, although I don't think it is such a personal view with our Freeport members. So again, what could government do? What could our public sector partners do? Work really closely together to find a universal solution that we all contribute to, and let's move on with our lives. I mean, we've certainly had to agree to some things that are over the top and also may or may not be deliverable, really. We've got solutions to deliver parts of things, but, I'm not sure that they'll necessarily give Natural England what they were expecting. But that's what's been agreed. We need a more strategic approach to some of these planning conditions across the piece, I would say. And can I have one more? Sorry. The one thing we are doing well by skill than management, I would by behaviour than by management is how we're dealing with inquiries and how we're marketing the region. And it feels as though we're getting things done because we've got the right people involved, but not because it's a particularly slick way of doing it. And I feel we could do much more and be much more compelling and much more of a force to be reckoned with in that regard. Because we are spending a lot of time, energy, individually, corporately, local government-wise, with other things like we have a members group called Future Humber. They spend money. We're doing all our own things. We do things. And it just feels like it's not adding up to what it could add up to if we were a bit more joined up. So that would be an ask for me, and that is something we can do locally without any permission from anybody.
Thank you. Tom, having gone through the planning system recently and looking to fill 5.5 million square foot of space, viability gaps, power, marketing, coming from a relative outsider as HBD, literally down the road in Sheffield, but relative outsider.
We delivered a Priory Park in Hull, so as a company we've got quite a bit of a history in the region.
There is actually a street called Henry Boot Way.
It's a big mistake because we can't get it we can't get it adopted, and it's like just a little lesson: don't name a street after your company, and then if you can't get it adopted, because it's a pain. Henry Boot Way. I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, planning on the site, viability. Obviously, viability. So this is I'm asking for funding, and the reason we need funding is because ultimately we don't know exactly the deals that we're going to pull together, and ultimately you go, well, why didn't you fund it, developer, and then everything will come. But at this stage, we don't necessarily know which transaction will come forward, and ultimately what's the financial makeup of that transaction. And so we'll have one inquiry that wants a small building and a lot of power. We'll have another inquiry that wants a big building and less power. And part of our kind of balance is how do we carve up what we have from the grid, what we can potentially get, when's the phasing of that coming through, what's the best tactics for us to enable phase one of a scheme and phase two, and it's all that kind of coordination between everything. So the reality is the viability depends on the transaction, and the transaction depends on what we have available. But the more we have, so the more oven ready we are as a site from a deliverability perspective, the best chance we have of landing the best transactions. And because otherwise you end up kind of waiting for those unicorn deals which can generate the land value, which then can provide enough to fund the infrastructure, and then we kind of hold it at zero, and then actually you make your money later on through it. But we've got a Freeport sunset date, so we have 2030 in our minds as to
31.
Oh, so you've got an extra year.
I've just given you an extra year.
I needed that.
I mean, there's your viability closing already.
That's
I mean,
good.
Come on.
That's good. It's a relief. But that would help. That would help if the Freeport was to be extended, because it gives more certainty around investments. And I understand some of the structure, but that's maybe something government could assist with, because ultimately we have to do deals. We don't make money in any other way, so we're 100% incentivized to do transactions and to bring things forward. So I think viability is always going to be a challenge, and the more available, almost we can start thinking about different drivers. Is it profit? Is it job creation? Is it a certain type of technology that we feel is beneficial for the region and that could kind of cluster out? It's trying to find that kind of optimum solution.
Thank you. And Paul, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help, has often been quoted back by many. Viability gaps, power, role of DBT, role of government in all of this. What's your perhaps personal views, to put you on the spot, rather than perhaps government party policy or whatever, but just what is it that you can add value through DBT, OFI, similar type of organisations?
It's a really, really good question. And, one of the perennial kind of concerns or observations about government is that there are so many different entry points, and it can be a very complicated and, tricky landscape. I think when it comes to DBT specifically, and DBT in the north of England, I see our team working across Whitehall, but primarily facing into the market and picking up the market challenges, but the specific thorny policy challenges that business have. Now, inevitably, we don't have a magic wand, right? So if someone comes to us and says, I don't know, it could be something related to, macroeconomic policy. It could be a, big tax policy, which we might not be able to, change overnight. But I'm already seeing companies working with us directly on very specific pieces of regulation. Some of it's around packaging in glass manufacturing. Some of it's around tariffs on particular categories of steel, where we can work to understand the granular impact in the business, and then use that to start to chip away and have sensible conversations and make sure that the voice of business is heard. We're amongst friends here. I know that, and I give you my really frank observation, which I hope in the role that I do, working with the likes of the Freeport here and businesses across the north, is that I genuinely don't want business to be an afterthought in terms of policy making, right? Or it to be a transactional relationship about what grant is released in X location or X project. Business should be at the beginning, at the front of policy making when it comes to industrial strategy, northern growth strategy, and all of the stuff we've talked about, because ultimately we will shape the policy environment, will create the right conditions, but the growth comes from the private sector. The wealth is built by the business, and our job is to, as I say, to create the conditions, have almost compacts with business, if you like, in terms of how it's delivered. But all of this stuff's going to be from a wealth creation perspective come from the private sector. Therefore, they should be a really central and early part of the policy making process. And sometimes that happens. I've seen great examples of it over the years, and sometimes it doesn't. So I suppose going back to your question about I'm here from the government and here to help and all the rest of it, it's how do we develop meaningful relationships with the folks and try and A, shape policy for the better, and B, be there really, really early doors so there's no surprises to the market.
Thank you. And if I just pick up on a couple of questions, as I said, more in the challenging debate way, the government are developing their industrial strategy zones. The Humber Freeport is one of those. We support that policy move. It makes sense. We now look for the additions and the value added from that. But do you think by being part of an industrial strategy zone, that should enhance our priority in terms of funding, power connectivity, utilities, and so on?
It's a really good question. So one of the challenges with industrial strategy and the way that it has to be deployed is that you inevitably have to make choices. Now, that means prioritization and all the things that we've talked about so far on this panel. From an industrial strategy perspective, the lens will be looked at for the East Coast as a whole is to how we can help accelerate some of the new and innovative technologies that could be built in the Humber and exported. I mean, one of the obvious examples is going to be the potential for things like deep water offshore floating offshore wind technologies, for example, which have got huge, massive market potential for the world, and the UK can lead and specialise in. So, an industrial strategy zone and the industrial strategy in itself should mean about prioritising, and inevitably the lens that's being looked at is the energy coast, but it doesn't start and stop with borders that are defined on whether it's mayoral basis or otherwise. It's going to run right up to the coast into Scotland, into Aberdeen, into Peterhead. It's going to be the work that's been undertaken in CCUS included on that, whether it's the likes of Viking and Acorn. So the short answer is that industrial strategy is a really, really important hook. And if we can show that we are reindustrializing, and that's to say, the quality of the content that's been produced and made in the UK stays here and is anchored here, then that's going to be hugely beneficial from a policy perspective. But again, the zone, amongst other things, is about creating the environment. It's important that businesses understand how that's going to be operationalised, but they'll be delivering the wealth that's created from it.
Okay, thank you. And one quick question before opening to the panel. Who would be the primary lead from the government in terms of inquiries? DBT?
Primary
Office?
lead?
Yes, lead agency. Would it be DBT? Would it be the Office for Investment? Would it be MHCLG?
It's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that I hear is that there's no wrong door, right? If you're having a sensible conversation with business and government, it should be a case that folks that are in government on the receiving end help coordinate. I think when it comes to these sorts of conversations, when it's something that is, cross Whitehall, it's industrial strategy. It's going to bring in partners from DESNES. It's going to bring in ALBs like NISO or GBE, and it's going to have a cross Whitehall. When you need the whole machine, I think it's going to be DBT, and I think you're going to work. They're going to work hand in glove with OFI. I mean, our teams work like this anyway. Yeah. But OFI, of course, are there to shepherd and steward inward and international investment, and they're very focused on the on that. But when it comes to those thorny, tricky policy issues of working through industrial strategy, creating the environment, you work with myself, you work with my colleague Joe, who stood there, who represents our Yorkshire region as a whole too, and we'll make sure that folks get to the right person.
Thank you very much. Last set of question to yourselves.
Me?
No, all three.
All of us.
We've let you off the hook now. It's what three things? What three things do you want to see accelerate? And what three things are a barrier that we need to remove, I think, quickly? Not the answer to be quickly, but quickly remove the barriers. Allow Tom a sales pitch as well halfway through, otherwise he'll be disappointed. But Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so, I mean, just to be clear, the Humber Freeport is not a development opportunity. It's the opportunity for us to create something that's, well, once in a career for me, once in a generation, probably for all of us, that is a proper economic generator that will serve generations of young people for, you know, the next 100, 200 years, right? That's the plan. So it's not about this short-term bit, which although short, it doesn't feel very short-term because we've been at it 8 or 9 years already, and it'll probably be another 10 or 11 or 12 before we get anywhere near. But that's the reality. Development takes a bit of time, but it's actually not really about this bit. It's about the next bit. And that is why I get very frustrated when it sometimes feel, and this isn't disrespectful to Paul and colleagues because I know you're doing your bit, but honestly, I sometimes wonder why government just can't see what we're talking about here. What we produce 30% of the country's energy, you know, the opportunity for new technologies to come through this region, well, the Humber region, not West Yorkshire, just to be clear, is massive. And it's so important, and we've got one shot. So I'm probably not going to give you three things. I would just love for people to realise we've got a window of opportunity. It is now. It is not next week or the week after. And this is setting the groundwork for people's careers, livelihoods, new business formation, wealth generation, social improvement and generation for the next hundreds of years, not the next 5 or 6, 7 years. And I would really like for everybody to focus on that, because it does sometimes feel as if we're shouting into a vacuum. And certainly some of the conversations that we had to have, and I'll give you one very petty example, but this just tells you how it is. When we were waiting for our conditions to be written on our planning application, we were told we had to wait for the one curlew expert in the whole of the country, because there was only one at the time. We had to wait for them to have a clear desk so they could look at the conditions. And we were about a year waiting for our planning conditions. It's not good enough. You know, meanwhile, whole generations of kids aren't getting jobs. So we have to do more than this. So that would be my one rant.
No, thank you. All rants are suitably acceptable, yes. And what I would also reinforce is the point that in our strategy is clearly stated it's about economic prosperity for our communities. And that's set out very much central to what the Humber Freeport has been going on from day one. 2.5 years later, delivering on that now. Tom?
It's really hard when you get asked to do a list and you haven't pre-prepared a list as to what the top 3 things are. So I might do a full politician and just not answer the question at all, really. And I guess maybe make an observation. And I think so I've been involved in some different regions and some different kind of growth areas. And I think one thing that's held the country back a little bit is this kind of localism where we're talking about, I don't know, North Humber, South Humber, South Tyneside, North Tyneside, Newcastle, Wales, and we're all like, well, we're better than them or whatever. Global money doesn't care. They are not bothered at all about what your accent is and kind of where you are. And I do think we've been a bit within ourselves as an industry and as regions, because we've been talking about specific schemes. And actually, look, the Humber Freeport, maybe it's not ambitious enough. Maybe it should be bigger. Maybe we should be doing more. And I guess this is a kind of a challenge to some extent. And I'm going to finish on saying we're open for business, but I'm building up to that kind of through this. But I do think one of the reasons why this is getting traction and why we can talk and government are interested and we can escalate things is because it has scale and because it has collaboration and because people have come together because they felt we were going to be greater than the sum of the parts, and that is happening. And if it were bigger and we stop thinking, okay, how are we better than that? Actually, how can we get the business that is currently located in the US to go, we want to be in this area for all these reasons, and that's genuine inward investment. We have got a problem in the UK with a trade deficit and our ability to produce stuff. And actually, how are we going to deal with that? And how can we provide solutions? So everything needs to be slicker. Everything needs to be tighter. We need to have less confusing messages. Maybe just have a couple of key messages and then just go and put the proposition. And everyone's an ambassador for it. You know, it's not down to Saul to deliver their site or Henry Boot to expertly deliver their site. It's for everyone to kind of come together. smooth, yeah, so it happens. No, it's like subliminal, isn't it? You just drop it in there. It's about everyone coming together and being greater than the sum of the parts.
Thank you. And I've just contacted East Riding Council for a Tom Whelan way, just to one up from Henry Boot. Paul, what works elsewhere? Just a slight nuance from the question there to yourself. What works elsewhere, and where is the Humber on that journey in terms of benchmarking itself against that?
It's a really good question. So I think the first thing I'd say that this is tricky when there's so much complexity to the conversation, and I totally hear the point, by the way, in relation to government and making sure that we're in the conversation and leaning into it. It's why I'm sat here today. It's why I'm actively engaging, and I it's really important to me, and I know to colleagues across the business department. I think internationally, the folks that get their acts together and look at the international opportunity and leverage that as well. You just mentioned, the export opportunity and the inward investment opportunity. Once the momentum continues to build even further, I think that the Freeport and others engaging with the consulates, the ambassador teams on the international basis, and some of the the work that we do there will be a really important part to the jigsaw. Now, you'll forgive me if I'm not close to this, but I would love to see the Humber Freeport actively out there in the States, actively out there in the Far East, particularly where there's technology alignment, and promoting the international perspective to this as well. It's interesting, isn't it? What's happened over the last 5 to 10 years, like the local ecosystem started to galvanise and started to move in the right direction, and everyone started to pull in that same direction, and then that's starting to materialise itself on the national and within industrial strategy. As that starts to consolidate, I think there is an international element to the campaign almost, and international. There are international comparators, be it ports and broader, similar economic landscapes that have done that in different parts of the world. But I think that's the next level, and that will galvanise people. So I think there is huge opportunity there. I think that covers it from me. I think on barriers, you mentioned that. Of some of the barriers, and that planning one that you just mentioned sounds immensely frustrating. And by building the coalitions that we've just talked about and really making this these examples clear, and then feeding them to the right parts of government, and hopefully we talk as well, we can start to make sure these things are learned and lessons are learned are a little bit better, because we have got particularly the Freeport, there is a time window. It's a tight time window,
which we all agree we need to extend. But thank you very much, Jen.
Can I just say as well, nobody's more competitive than me. I am terrible, and I know that it's a sickness. However, I think we need to really just run our own race on this and stop comparing ourselves to, are we better than them? Are we worse? Do they have a better? We have got a unique offer and a unique window. We just need to make the most of it, whatever that looks like. Because I'm kind of think we sometimes drag ourselves down by comparing ourselves to other regions who have a different offer and a different set of actors, and they have a different set of financial positions and all the rest of it. And I'd much rather we were just supremely confident and ran our own race without being distracted by watching the person running behind us. Let's just go for the finish line and just have it. That's the competitiveness coming out, isn't it? But not be distracted by everybody else.
I liked hearing that we're taking the Humber to Hong Kong. We're going international. That's like study trip. Let's go.
Well, there's a rallying call. Time for any questions from the audience. Anybody got any queries, statements, sales plugs? If not, thank you very much. And could you show your appreciation for the panel, please? Thank you very much. Thank you.